Hello and welcome to our latest edition of A Bit of Light Relief. We have one hell of an episode.
A wonderful guest
for you this afternoon. We want to welcome the wonderful David Bovis to the sofa this afternoon, who is really going to stimulate your thinking process, and more of that to come. But we're generally talking about change here, but very much to do with neuroscience and the brain. And I promise you, David is a wonderful person. He explains it so I can understand it, which means you're a very good guy indeed. But first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Jeanette Ramsden of the Curve Group. I haven't messed around with my name too much today, but yeah, Nettie here, here to try and help our HR community in bringing sort of stimulating thinking and different thought processes to your everyday work, and of course a little bit of light relief for you all. With me on the sofa is Kelly.
Kelly York, Chief Operations Officer at the Curve Group.
And David, welcome. We were trying to work out how we know each other.
Oh no.
And we can't remember which one we're talking about neuroscience. It's quite funny, right?
But if anybody out there remembers introducing us, let us know, right?
Please take credit. David is actually a prolific networker and actually is really, really superb at it, and has been super kind in introducing me to all sorts of very interesting people. But actually, you know, we got on straight away because what you do and your area of expertise is just phenomenal. And without further ado, I feel like I need to hand over to you, David, so you can explain, you know, what you're doing, how you do it, really.
Okay, I guess the summary then is that I read a lot.
Read your books, kids.
Reading is this wonderful talent. I didn't know, who knew, right? But I read a lot over 20 or 30 years through philosophy, psychology and neuroscience. I'm a trained engineer, ended up in director positions, worked around Europe, and then met my brilliant business partner, Levent, who used to run Toyota in Turkey. And he had also studied the same stuff. So we were a match made in heaven. Yeah. We pulled our resources and you know, created... I mean, I created this model, BTFA, which I'm sure we'll talk about, about 25 years ago. But then we sort of built this leadership education program around it, mainly through COVID. So we've launched it, you know, 2.5, 3 years ago, and we've been delivering it to leadership teams around the world ever since, and it's growing. So yeah, it's getting popular.
And you're in the perfect market at the moment.
And just so that I can do the gratuitous plug on your behalf, what is the name of your company?
Oh, Ducks in a Row.
Wait! For those of you watching for the first time ever, we have the gratuitous.
Yeah, digger today.
There is a margin of error, maybe.
And I think it's really relevant at the moment as well, because change is constant and definitely happening all of the time. And there's lots of change that we see in big consultancy firms that just is that plug and play, same change, doesn't work, doesn't take effect, fails within the first quarter. There's all of these stats, isn't there?
Yeah.
And
first 100 days, right?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. I was reading quite a bit about this over the last couple of weeks, and it is quite interesting how much of this fails. And I think what you do really ensures, doesn't it, the change piece?
Absolutely. I mean, that was the driving force, right, behind the requirement for this in the market. I mean, leading change for 25, 30 years in various positions around Europe, I've seen the change programmes fail. I've seen the ERP, you know, £30 million programmes, 10 years later, still not working properly, costing £90 million, you know. So
throwing more and more at it to make it stick, and it just doesn't.
There's a fundamental misunderstanding and assumption in the market that more money, you know, more money, and more technology is going to fix whatever's not working. And we miss the point that it's about people, right? So if we don't get the people bit
100%.
right, and then for me, you know, I guess the root cause analysis from an engineering point of view must have had an impact on my brain over all these years, because I felt that we just didn't know enough about the people piece, because the words, the language we used was too generic. You know, it's all over empowerment. What does that actually mean? What's engagement mean? You know, when you look at it through the neuroscience lens, engagement is increased oxytocin levels. So the question's got to be, how do you increase oxytocin levels? But we don't think about leadership and management through that lens, and therefore we make all these mistakes. We trigger disengagement, resistant misalignment, and wonder why our change programs don't last and don't sustain. So it seems so obvious once you see it, but it seems that in the market it's really difficult to spot.
And that's the bit that goes wrong, isn't it? Change agents are needed across the business. Everyone needs to be engaged in part of that. And I think that's one of the key things where you really support and link the missing pieces, really.
It is, and it's if you think about it, I think we've had the language in the market has been process and systems, hasn't it, for decades?
Yeah.
And the people bit gets lost, and then some people talk about people, profit and planet, or planet. People and profit, whichever way around they put it. But it's starting to, I think the way the world's changed, we're starting to look at the bigger picture and how it all fits together. So that whole systems thinking, going back to Ackoff and Checkland and all those people in the past, it's starting to actually get ingrained into the way people are looking at the world and life, right? So if we're going to add in, I always like to use the idea of a three-legged stool. We've only had two legs on our stool and wonder why it keeps falling over. So if we put the third leg on and look at the people bit, if we've got all that technology about coding for systems, and we've got all the processes, the detail into time calculations, whatever else it might be, when you talk about people, it's like, it's an HR problem. Yes. Right? It's like, why don't leaders know more about people? So that's what we're trying to do. We teach leaders about people, which includes themselves, because they've got, contrary to popular belief, they've got a brain too, right? Leaders. But
controversial.
Well, talk to the guys on the shop floor, and it's not that controversial, right? But the point is, we've all got the same fundamental mechanics inside this skull of ours, right? And it means that we all have very similar experiences of life. We all know what imposter syndrome feels like. We all make mistakes, and our stomach falls out,
Yeah.
And when you realise that people are predominantly in quite a bad place in life and need support and encouragement, it means you don't go around banging tables and telling them what they've got to do and which targets to hit, because it's only going to make it worse for the way their brain works. I mean, I can go into some of the science, but if the stress levels are up very quickly, I'll tell you this bit, the stress levels rise, so that's cortisol increase. Big thing linked between the HPA axis from the way your middle of your brain, pituitary gland, adrenal gland type response, right? All part of your fight and flight mechanism. And that cortisol level raises, and what happens is because you detect fear, your brain's detecting fear at a subconscious level, it bypasses that the way that normally sensory stimulus, experience from the world gets processed by the brain. So it goes straight to this, you've heard the amygdala, everybody's heard of the amygdala these days, but it goes straight to that limbic system, that fight-flight mechanism, and it bypasses all the rational thinking capability. So that means that part of your brain then needs more glucose energy to power it, right? So if that's the case...
Is that why I go for the chocolate?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, I thought there'd be a good reason.
So you're going to get me going on. That's dopamine release, right?
Okay. I just need a dopamine release. Yeah, okay. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but go on.
But the point there, the final point on that little rant is, if you haven't got glucose energy feeding your prefrontal cortex because it's going to the middle of your brain, you can't think rationally. And then other issues happen. You don't collaborate so much, or you don't problem solve so well, and then businesses don't move forward. And we're creating this at a neurological level, but because we haven't got the language for it, we just don't see it. So that's our main objective. Teach leaders the language of brain function, the basics that we've identified over the years that make the biggest difference, and it completely changes the way leaders see the world and what decisions they make and the way they approach change and transformation.
100%.
And it's working really well.
Yeah. Kelly, you were gonna. Shall I jump in or?
We're
both wanting to say.
This is what you all know on this episode is Jeanette and I have nothing to contribute. so we're going to fire questions.
We're just learning along with you. Absolutely.
But I think what's obviously change has been very at the focus of everything in the last 5 years, mostly because of what we've been going through economically and various other things. Have you seen what you've been delivering, or what's the impact of that been on the leaders over the last 5 years, and how has that contributed to drive that successful change, I guess, into businesses?
Yeah, I think there's so many ways to answer that. I think, obviously most C-suite people want money type answers, right? They want how does it hit the bottom line? And it is so difficult to say that if you change the way people think and feel, and therefore what you do to contribute to that, it changes relationships, dynamics, and therefore all of the key attributes you're looking for as a business, like collaboration, it drops resistance, attrition rates fall, all those kind of key things that sit behind performance. But I think, where we've worked with companies over many years, and again, I mentioned Philip Holt from when he was formerly SVP at GK in Aerospace. He applied BTFA globally throughout all of the change directors that he employed.
So do you just want to explain what BTFA is?
Yeah. Well done. I take it for granted.
Like all of those people need educating.
And you're lucky I've got it in the right order with my dyslexia, right?
The amount of time it gets called BFTA, it's funny. But again, I haven't got time today, but I can tell you why it doesn't matter which order it goes in, really. But the letters, the initialisation is B is belief, T is thinking, F is feeling, and A is action. And what we do is we focus on action because we judge people as objects, right? We look at what they do on the outside. We don't think about what's going on the inside. So, and if you do try and talk about that stuff, it really quickly sounds soft and fluffy and tree huggy, and everybody just turns off, especially at board level, right? So what we want to try and do is put the science behind it. And so, without going too far, but if you've got a belief about anything being good, bad, right or wrong, right, in the world about any subject, there has to be wiring in your brain to represent that. And the only way you think about it is if the wiring fires, right? The electrical impulses, it's all to do with different chemicals and whatever else, but sodium, potassium ions, and I could go off on tangents because I like talking about the science. But the feeling bit is the chemicals involved. So this is when you get into the dopamine we just mentioned, right, and the cortisol and the different neurotransmitters and hormones in the body. And all of that it needs to be, find a balance, be in homeostasis to
basically be at the right level to embrace that.
And modern life makes sure that it's constantly at the wrong level. So what again, going back to community, connection, a sense of belonging, these are all the things, because we're a tribe animal, that we actually need as human beings, and we don't get in the modern workplace. And the leader of the future that's going to get the best performing company is going to be the people that realise this, tap into it, and actually do it on purpose and give people the conditions, my favourite phrase, create the conditions in which the brain can perform at its best, right? And until we start doing that, we're just going to keep wondering why everything we try eventually fails and slips and we don't get anywhere.
So it doesn't look like we do a lot of prep for these bit of light reliefs, but David actually reminded me of something which is very connected to this, is that HR used to be human relations, not human resources. And I think that's a perfect example of how we've turned people into actions rather than actually the whole relations and that piece. I just thought that was absolutely fascinating, and how brilliantly it does tie back into that BFTA, and how we sort of need to treat people as human beings in order to get the most out of them, quite frankly.
First BFTA instead of BTFA.
Oh, was it? Oh, no.
Don't worry, she's doing so well.
Oh,
I think I've got a real life scenario as well at the moment where we're working with a lot of CEOs where there's people that are deliberately adverse to change and actually to some point sabotage anything that they try and do, and the answer is like, what do you need that to happen? The answer is always yes, so why isn't it happening? And then it's so difficult to answer that question. Have you got any advice for those people that have got these workforces that are deliberately like sabotaging change, or is there something that actually is going wrong in that organisation to not allow for that, really?
Well, yeah, the advice is come and have BTFA and have a break.
Oh, yeah, we all were.
That could have been fun.
But no, people don't resist change, right? We love change. We change our clothes, we change our hair, we change our houses, spouses, whatever else it might be, and where we go on holiday, where we take the new spouse, we embrace change all the time, but the key is when we choose it.
Yes,
right, and that's the difference. It's imposed change that's the problem, and therefore, from a CEO senior leadership point of view, it's got, if you reverse engineer back from that point of understanding, the obvious answer is, well, include people, and as soon as people are included, they feel valued, right? And guess what happens when you feel valued? All your chemical, mix changes in your brain. So, if you create the conditions in which brains can perform at their best, but what you said there is it talks to the psychology level. Neuroscience kind of underpins and explains how and why some of these psychological principles work. But most people, because of imposed control in their formative years from 0 to 3, 4, 5 years old, we're imprinted with a fear of failure and rejection, right? It usually takes us until we're 40 or 50 years old to get over it, right? So you've got a lot of people.
You've only got 10 years to go.
I've done my 40s, 50s, 60s.
But yeah, that's it. If you're seeing people respond like that, it's because their brain has learned to survive life in a particular way, and whatever it's processing as inbound sensory stimulus, it's triggering it to respond in the way that it's been designed to. So it's not. And again, this is where you start to get to a point where you can create a no blame environment. Because when you start to appreciate people for their BTF and not their A, then you don't judge them. You say, I wonder why their brain is processing this situation that way to make them behave or react like that. And therefore you can get into it and understand what it is and do something about it practically. Right? So it's, the more you know, the better you do.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, what I thought how you were going to answer Kelly's question around how you monetize it is.
Well, we didn't finish that point, did we?
No, well, I hope at the Curve Group we get very often involved where people have started change, have spent a huge amount of money on trying to make that change happen, and it gone crashingly wrong actually. And I thought that was the actual value that you're going to bring, and the point being that I've not met anybody that's come away from one of your courses and not really sort of been wowed by it, David. And I think this stuff really works, and I think we don't always allow ourselves time to think about how to get to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row. Nearly. Did you see what I did there? It was a teeny D. Yeah. But what I love is the fact that you've got this brain that was Six Sigma, process and improvement, very scientific, that actually where your business has ended up is actually around the human side of things, because that's the way that the Six Sigma actually works.
But again, that's really interesting, because I think I did a podcast with Philip, going back to Philip, and I'll tell you what he managed to achieve, and
I need to meet
identify as BTFA. But he associates some of the success to BTFA being involved with the change program, and I'll quickly get it in that I think it was JP Morgan Casanova reported in the Times that the Melrose Group that owns the GKN, they posted 410 million ROI on their investment within 4 years.
I'll high five you for that one.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Well done for you.
And that's not for me, that's Philip and his team, Edwin and Anthony and those guys, but it's the fact that they acknowledged that BTFA made a difference to the way they approached it, and they got better results.
Brilliant.
So that, that's that. But
so what one piece of advice, I mean, there's a huge amount that we've just discussed, and I actually think that we could probably stay for the rest of the day.
We probably will stay for a bit of time.
And drink wine, but David says it's not good for the brain. I'm just saying.
I stopped drinking 15 years ago.
There we go, And we could talk all afternoon, but we are wanting to sort of keep this at a high level and give meaningful advice. What piece of advice would you give to our HR community, CPO, HR directors, if you could, around this stuff?
Well, I think it's a good question. The biggest thing I've recognised since we've been doing this in this format, because I've been teaching BTFA for 15 years, but in this online scalable format, we've managed to get in front of a lot more people in senior leadership positions. And the biggest thing that highlights itself to me is that there's this huge disconnect in the market where people use language and talk generically about change, performance improvement, culture, empowerment, engagement, all these things. And they're all proxy terms for brain function. But we don't make the connection that it's brain function. So, one more quick bit of science, right? A lady called Elizabeth Gould in 2009 used a process involving bromodioxide uridine, right? And it replaced tritiated thymidine. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to this.
That was all good. We didn't know.
Silly long words, neuroscience, boring.
There's no need for language as well.
basically what she did by using this thing is she tagged new neurons that were growing in the brain, in an adult human brain, with a fluorescent dye that proved that in the last 24 hours of life, new neurons were growing. And it was the first time in the history of man that we know of, modern history, that we've been able to prove unequivocally that this process called neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, happens in adult human brains, right? And there's been lots of speculation and reasons why that's been poo-pooed and denied and dismissed in the past. But now we've got unequivocal proof, and it's 16 years old. So it's quite new, not science. But if people can recognise that and acknowledge that, to learn anything, to do anything different tomorrow than you do today, to have a bit of knowledge tomorrow that you didn't have today, you've got to have a new firing pattern in your brain. You've got to have new neurons and new neural representation for that in your brain. So, that's the thing. If people can make that connection between, if we want people to behave differently, perform better, achieve targets, it's that all we look at and all we see is an output of their brain function. And if we want to really deal with root cause, we can't ignore that now that we've got the science to prove it and look at it in detail. So, with the new technology, the way we can see what's going on in brains, the big models mapping mouse brains and all this stuff, and the parallels we can draw from mammalian brains in animals to humans, and what we can prove directly in humans, is just it challenges so much of what has been historically inherited leadership, management, training that's all come from theory and speculation. Now we can say this bit works, that bit doesn't, don't do this, do that, and we've got the science to back it up. And that's and it's human things like inclusion that it highlights.
Wow. What can I say? I don't know about you, but I'm completely blown away, David. But
I think there's so much to cover. If you want any information, come to you directly.
Definitely.
Lots and lots.
Genuinely, thank you for joining us. Thank you for. I appreciate only covering things at an incredibly high level, but thank you for all of your insights and truly stimulating us in our thought process around change, because it's the one constant that we do have. So if you do want help with that, obviously David is the person to contact. So David, thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of A Bit of Light Relief. I know we definitely have. We're going to go away now and get some more insights. If there are any topics that you would like us to cover, please let us know your thoughts on this episode and any others that you would like to see. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and wish you all well in your daily tasks and actions.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.